This is our last webinar of 2022. Thank you for being here. My name is Joseph Hills. I am an ELT consultant with eFuture. It's likely if you haven't seen one of my previous webinars, that's okay. This is only my third one, but I'm glad to be here today to be talking with you about course books and the course books that we make here at eFuture. The reason it's important to talk about and compare course books now at the end of the year is because I'm sure many of you are preparing for the next school year, the next year, the next semester. And when that happens, we have to sometimes change books. And it's always good to know which book is the most suitable for our teaching style, our school style, and our learning objectives. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And before I get into any course book type work or explanations, I want to just do a very quick warm-up discussion here. So the warm-up discussion is 3 simple questions. You can write them into the chat if you like. I hope everybody shares, but the questions are pretty simple. When you read for pleasure, how do you choose a book? What attracts you to that book or to any book? And what is the first thing you do when you choose a book? So very, very simple questions, but they're pretty important to our discussion about course books as well. But in this case, I'm just curious about how you choose the books that you like to read, not for work, but just for pleasure. I'll give everybody a minute or two to think about an answer and to share an answer in the chat if they'd like. Okay, you choose depending on the genre. Okay. What kinds of genres do you generally gravitate towards? Self-help books and fantasy. Okay, wonderful. And is there a particular reason you gravitate towards these books? Maria says the plot. Sure. That sounds like if you're going in and you know that you want to read a book. How many of you go into bookstores just randomly or go to the library randomly and just kind of browse amongst the shelves? How does a book kind of stop you and pull it off of the shelf, or encourage you to pull it off of the shelf and take a look at it? Kind of like the woman in the picture is here. The cover, the title, absolutely. Anything that is eye-catching is usually quite important. The title, yeah, absolutely. I'm very similar. If I see a title that looks interesting, I will stop for a moment and take a look and see what it could be about, read the back cover, read about the author even. I will look at the cover picture if there is a cover picture, all sorts of those things. So not to dwell too long on this because it's just a warm-up discussion. If you have other answers, please continue to share them. But to kind of move things on, the reason I'm talking about this is because your students have the same sort of reaction when they're given a book. They don't get to choose the book. The teachers and the schools are choosing the books for them, but they are going to be doing pretty much the same thing that you guys are doing when you go to a bookstore or a library. You grab the book, you look at the cover, you look at the back, you maybe flip through the pages and see what's interesting. If there are pictures, you kind of browse at the pictures a little bit. And yeah, it's to see what sparks an interest. That is a very good way of describing it. So your students, before they even begin using the book, they're going to try and find something that is eye-catching or is something that will likely pull them in. Sometimes it's just in the hopes of having something to look forward to. Other times it's so that they can get excited about the class. So the book is, the way the book looks, the way the book is presented can be quite important for a class, and just building that engagement before the class even begins. So the plan today is just to talk about each of the series and give a little introduction about each of those course books. We'll talk about leveling and flow, as well as unique traits and strengths, and then we'll kind of wrap things up by talking about choosing the right book. Now, this isn't going to be done in an explicit order, because we'll be kind of doing these things book by book. So this is the plan, but it's not going to go in this exact order necessarily. Now, just some food for thought. When we think about education and teaching and learning, I think this quote is very, very important to remember, especially the parts that I've bolded for you. Learning is a lifelong process of transforming information and experience into knowledge, skills, and behavior. On the other hand, education is just one approach to learning. It's a process where society passes on the knowledge, values, and skills from one generation to another. So when we are thinking about books, when we're thinking about classrooms, we should be realizing that there is a difference between learning and education. Learning can be done in all sorts of ways, and education, school, is just one of those ways in which learning happens. Students learn things through their own experiences, trying things, exploring. They learn from their families, through stories, all sorts of things. So when we're talking about education, we're only talking about one specific approach. And course books are designed for that one specific approach, which means that there are other skills that we have to incorporate into our lesson planning that course books just can't provide. And that can be done through things like extension activities and extra worksheets or exposure to, in this case, English language. So this is just something to keep in mind as we go forward. Now, what is a course book? This is really, really important. What do you guys think a course book is? Any thoughts, any ideas? A series of books? Yeah, usually, but not necessarily. When we, like, certain classes will use could use maybe one book for an entire year. An integrated book, that is semi-accurate, pretty close, I would say. Any other thoughts? Books depending on students' level, development books. Yeah, these are all part of what a course book is. 4 skills, 1 book. Books used by students. Yes, these are all definitely a big part of what a course book is. So an English course book is a text that teaches all 4 of the primary language learning skills. So those 4 primary language learning skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But an English course book is also a text that focuses on critical, practical language and grammar targets. So the language that is being used in a course book, and the topics that are being used in a course book, are fairly similar across a great many course books if you go based on level. The way in which they're presented will be different, and that's important. But also, an English course book is a text that provides teachers and learners with a structure. And this is often formed through methodology or criteria for assessment. And this is where a course book differs from a skill book or a book that we would read for pleasure or extension, because the students are learning based off of that methodology that we are presenting them. So let's talk about our series. eFuture has, does anybody know how many course books we have? How many course book series we have? Well, our first one that we're going to be talking about today is Little Hands. This is our first course book, because not first in development or production, but this is the first in terms of level. We have Hand in Hand, which is the continuation of Little Hands. We have Let's Smile, and our newest series, we have Smart English Second Edition, which is coming in 2023. Sue gave a wonderful presentation on the ins and outs and specifics of Smart English Second Edition last month. So if you're curious about that, you can, if you missed that webinar, you can find it on our YouTube channel. But these are the 4 series that eFuture uses. If you're using first edition of Smart English, maybe you can count it as 5 if you wish. Now, the components for all of our course book series, all 4 series come with a few things that you can pretty much ensure. The student book, a workbook, the teacher's manual, flashcards, a mobile app, and worksheets, downloadable worksheets, things like that. Those worksheets will be different, but these are the things that you can definitely expect for all of the eFuture course books to have. And Smart English Second Edition is no different in that there is a workbook and a student book. There's a teacher's manual. There are flashcards. But there is a newer version of our app. And the Smart English Second Edition app has the special AI speaking feature, which is the first of its kind for eFuture. So there is this additional form of speaking practice that Smart English Second Edition has. The leveling and flow for our course books. So as I mentioned earlier, Little Hands is our lowest level course book, and that's because it's geared for a nursery or kindergarten students exclusively. If you have lower level elementary school students that need more practice with phonics and things like that, then Little Hands is still useful. So I'm not saying that Little Hands can't be used for elementary school students. It absolutely can be, but it is in terms of CEFR level, it's our lowest of the levels. So all 4 books are pre-A1. And this is to get them ready to, if they choose to, go into Hand in Hand, which is the course book that goes from that pre-A1 kindergarten level all the way up to A2 for the upper elementary school students. And in between Little Hands and Hand in Hand, we have Smart English and Let's Smile, which are varying degrees of they vary in challenge depending on the skills that you care about and care about emphasizing in your book. So you can see that chart here just for visual purposes. But let's talk about the unique traits and strengths of each of these series. Obviously, if we're going to do a comparison, there are some things that all of these series will have in common, things that you can expect. And that's partially because eFuture has a very specific developmental philosophy when we create books. And part of that is that lessons should be fun and easy. All of our series have a systematic and spiraled syllabi. So that means concepts will reappear in different contexts so that the students get continued exposure to important language, but they see it in different ways and learn how to use it in different ways. All of our books are meant to be engaging, using illustrations, pictures, and animations that should be entertaining for the students and get them really interested in the what they are learning, the language topics. And that goes along with the catchy songs and chants as well. I know from experience that when you use one of these books and you use the song regularly in your class, it does tend to get stuck in your head, and you'll find yourself at home or like doing grocery shopping, and you'll just suddenly start humming the hand in hand theme song, things like that. And there are extensive downloadable resources. So that's something that we want to make sure that we encourage. There are things that you can get outside of the book that will help complement the book. And of course, as you can see on the screen and next to me, we have memorable characters as well. And this will help you in the classroom, but it helps with making the book more engaging and relatable. So now specifically for Little Hands. Little Hands is, for each book, has 10 units. Which is 8 regular units and 2 review units, except for the nursery level, which has only 8 units. And Little Hands is meant to build simple vocabulary, useful everyday language, and it has a CLIL-based lesson structure. So CLIL, content and language integrated learning. So the lessons that they have in class or in the book, in the course book, will be connected to class subjects that they would have at school. Little Hands, in terms of a methodology, is developed with the whole child approach, which I'll talk about a little bit in the next slide. It's unique because we have Chip the Puppet. So that is included. You can use Chip in the class to engage and to practice conversation and play games with the students. And when you go through the books, the characters grow with the students. So the characters in the book will, as you get through each level, will grow up a little bit, just like the students would be. And students are prepared for the hand-in-hand curricula as well. So when I talked about the whole child approach, when you go through the pages of the book, you'll notice certain skills and things are emphasized on each page. So we'll do things like language acquisition, which is a big part of English language learning. It's a big part of the course books, obviously, but it's also part of that whole student or whole child approach. So we're going to focus on the language acquisition element on every page, but we also want to reinforce motor skill development, cognitive development, and social emotional development. So this book is meant for very young learners. So they're just getting into school. They're just learning to interact with the world around them. So we want to teach them not just the etiquette and how to be polite in class, but we want to get them to think about the language that they're using as well. And for very young learners, it's very important that we get them up and moving around and interactively playing with each other, with the things in the classroom. So we incorporate elements of that into the textbook as well. So simple things like just coloring and drawing is a good motor skill. It helps with handwriting as well. But there are games and activities that they can do and should do with this book that will help them get more coordinated. Now, of course, I want to help you understand how to use the book a little bit more. So just a very simple and helpful activity that I like to recommend for Little Hands, just to kind of explain how that whole child approach can be used, would be this one here. And it's simple. We're looking at Unit 2, which is all about colors. And you'll see on the page that you have the key language targets for each page. Some of the other key targets for Unit 2 are not just the colors, but the question and answer of what color is this? It's red, it's blue. And then the polite expressions, and social emotional development expression, here you are and thank you. So what we're doing in this activity is we're going to combine all of those skills into one thing. I'm not going to go through each step in detail like I have on the screen here. You can download this PowerPoint after if you want to use this activity. But basically, this activity is a paired activity where the students take a look at a picture, a very simple picture, and they identify what is in the picture, and they identify the color of that object in the picture. All of the picture should be things that they are already familiar with. You can use classroom objects. You can use the students themselves. But the picture should be quite simple. So they identify what is in the picture and they identify the color. And then the students talk to each other and ask what's in the picture, what color it is. And then they go and find the correct crayon in a basket up at the front of the class. They bring the correct crayon or the marker, whatever, back to their table, and they draw the picture themselves using the correct colors. So simple activity, but it does incorporate the different skills of the whole child approach. Okay, now the Smart English Second Edition. We're talking about this one because in terms of leveling, I would say that this is the next level up in terms of difficulty. Now, this is of the specifically elementary course books. This is the book that I would say is the simplest in form and structure. And by that, I mean that it has a slower pace of learning than Let's Smile or Hand in Hand. There is a larger emphasis on conversation in the book, and it encourages independent study at home with the workbook activities. This is also the first eFuture series to include AI technology, which I mentioned earlier. And there are practical ebook tools for the classroom. So the ebook in second edition has been revamped to make it a bit more easy to use in the class. So like you can switch back and forth between the student book and the workbook without having to close any windows. The tools for zooming in on the page are easier to use, and it's really, really useful. So with Smart English as well, each level has 12 units with 6 additional review units and then 2 assessment units. You can kind of treat them as like a midterm and a final assessment. The layout for Smart English has changed a little bit. So if you use Smart English first edition, you'll notice that this looks a little different, but the content is pretty much unchanged. We've just updated the images and cleaned up the layout a little bit. So the big takeaways for Smart English are that listening and speaking are part of every activity. So if you look through at the directions here, you'll see the directions listen and repeat. Listen and repeat. It shows up quite often. Listen and chant. And then ask and answer. So these sorts of directions are quite important for indicating the skills that are going to be used the most in a lesson. And as you can see, because there's a lot of listening and speaking, that means that there's also going to be a lot of opportunity for students to talk together, which is really, really useful. Further, the objectives for Smart English are to get students to use language, like everyday language, consistently. So they will get they'll get exposure to the same targets in different contexts, like I mentioned before, but they will be able to use them over and over and over in different situations. We do this because there are fewer language targets in the series as compared to Let's Smile or Hand in Hand. So even though there are fewer language targets, there is an increase in repetition, which is great for students that need that additional practice or that need additional exposure to each of the things that they're learning. And here's a sample activity for Smart English. So with Smart English and with most of our books here at eFuture, we do have the spiral syllabus so that things get repeated and connected to each other. And so here we have Unit 1 and Unit 2, which are similar. For Unit 1, we have the key targets, which is the question and answer grouping of what is it? It's a book, it's a chair, it's a desk, and then the key targets in Unit 2 are, is it a desk? No, it isn't. Yes, it is. So you can see the language that is being taught in the first unit is about your bedroom, my room, things like that. And then the second unit talks about my classroom. So we can see that there are going to be connections there that the students will intuitively understand. So with this activity, again, what we're going to do is compare objects in different spaces. So this is a paired activity again. You can also do this in a group as well, but have the students describe things in 2 different rooms. And you can do this either by having 2 pictures that they look at, or you can have it on the screen if you want, but have them identify the similarities and differences in those pictures. And they can do things as simple as just circling the objects that are in both rooms. If you want to incorporate a writing component, you can have them write some very simple sentences. It's really, really up to you how you take this activity and scale it to the appropriate level for your students. But this is something that you can do, and all of the components that you would use for this activity come straight from the book. Okay, our next unit is Let's Smile. Now, Let's Smile has a more more gradual pace than Hand in Hand, but it moves a little bit faster than Smart English. So it's kind of right in the middle of those 2 series. The emphasis is on reading and listening as well as speaking. So Smart English was more speaking and listening. There's a higher emphasis on reading in Let's Smile. Again, it is a CLIL-based, each of the lessons is CLIL-based, and the language targets are linked to class subjects and real-world topics. And these topics are developed to engage students at every level. So we try and make topics that are exciting and interesting for the students, as well as connect them to their classrooms. Similar to Smart English, we have 12 units per book and 6 WorldLink units. And there's also the Wiley test prep package. So here's what the layout looks like. As I mentioned, it's listening, speaking, and reading that is all emphasized in each activity. The illustrations are just as vibrant and as engaging as they are in Smart English, but you'll notice that there are different layouts that are used. So you'll see like this comic here that the students will listen to, they will read together, and they will read out loud as well. So these comics are a different way to expose the students to the learning topics. Each of the activities as well is designed to connect the classroom to the student's world. So here in the comic here, you'll see that they're talking to each other, they're introducing each other, they're using polite expressions as well, and that comes within the greater concept of talking about pets. Reading and speaking skills are connected to social emotional development as well. So similar to Little Hands, but just in a slightly older context. The vocabulary and language targets are connected to expand on concepts, and they're used in multiple situations. So just like in Smart English, there's continued exposure, repetitive exposure to language targets, but in this case, there's a lot of extra vocabulary that helps make those connections better and stronger as well. And a very simple activity that I love to do, and I do this with my students whenever I can. It's great using those flashcards that you can download and print out, but also the students have them in their books. You can play a simple game called Four Corners. It's one of my favorite games to play because it gets the students moving around the classroom. But it also, with this game, you can do things like incorporate TPR, so that total physical response to teach vocabulary. With this specific activity here, I have the 4 animals that are being taught in this lesson. You can see here, cat, turtle, rabbit, and dog. So we have the matching flashcards here. And I put one of those flashcards in each corner. And then I teach the students specific TPR. So just a simple action for a dog, a cat, a turtle. You choose whatever it is. It can be something as simple as doing this for bunny, but you can make it as dramatic as you want. You can even have the students choose the TPR and have them make the associations themselves. But you teach them a TPR, and then you have them listen to a statement, not a question, a statement, where you'll say something like, I have a long tail. Now, if you look at these pictures, there are a couple of animals that have long tails. The students get to choose which corner of the room they want to go to. So they're making these associative connections based on the images and the words, and they're drawing comparisons as well. So if you say, I have a long tail, they will go to probably the cat corner or the dog corner. If they're going to the rabbit corner, you know that you have to teach something there. You have to teach them about tails or length, something like that. So you're able to assess your students on the fly. But your students might also have a reason for why they went to rabbit or turtle for a long tail. And it may be that they have a pet at home that happens to have a long tail. So this is where learning versus education, that interplay comes into contact, because the students' experiences changed what they've learned and what they understand. And as a teacher, we have to kind of take that in stride. We can't necessarily do that with a course book. So we connect their learned experiences with the language targets and explicit learning material in the books. And that's really, really useful with an activity like this. Well, like I said, I know that was a very quick crash course on that activity, but you can download the PowerPoint and you can read in more detail about that activity. Also, I will give you my contact information, and you can ask me any follow-up questions you have about the activities at any time. So don't worry about it if that was a little too fast. Okay, and our last course book that we're going to talk about today is Hand in Hand. Now here, again, it's a 12-unit book with 6 school link units. What we're going to be doing here is we're connecting English language to school and connecting it to global communication. So that is the big difference and development with Hand in Hand. This starts in Little Hands, though. So if you have students that have used Little Hands, they will be familiar and comfortable with the structure of Hand in Hand. There's a great deal of emphasis on the 21st century skills. And again, it's still CLIL-based. And when we're talking about 21st century skills, we are focusing on those 4 C's. The 4 C's being critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, which is my favorite, and communication. And of course, we have that Wiley test prep package as well. Hand in hand is a bit more challenging because we are emphasizing all four learning skills just about equally. So with Let's Smile and Smart English, we're focusing, or the emphasis is on 2 and 3 specific skills. But here, we're putting an equal emphasis on all four. So we're including a bit more writing in hand than you would see in the Let's Smile or Smart English course books. That is not to say that there is no writing in those the other 2 course books. It's just de-emphasized slightly within the book. But we have worksheets and things like that will help add additional writing components into your studies if that's what you want, but it's more of an option. So with hand in hand, one thing that you will notice here is that there are a few more pages, and there's quite a bit of content on each page. But each of the pages still incorporates a lot of communication. So almost all of these exercises can be done either teacher to students, so teacher oriented, or they can be done in pairs or in small groups. The book is quite dynamic in that aspect. Let's Smile is too, Smart English is as well, but here it becomes quite easy for the teacher to step back and become more of a facilitator as opposed to the leader of the class. And that is because of the 21st century skill methodology. And like I said, the big philosophy for hand in hand is linking. So linking units to each other and linking the units to student life, and then linking units to the world at large. Let me go back one quick second. So what we have here on this page, these 4 pages down here, we have these links and connections that are very, very useful and very, very important to connect the content to the world around us, which is why this page here is called The World Around Us. So we're connecting the language that they learned for Unit 4, which is in the park, to here, real life parks. So you'll see different parks, then they talk about the things that they see there. So there's an expansion there to make it more practical and effective for students. You also have this unit link, which clearly states where the language is coming from. So this is to include and to assist teachers in explaining the content on the page, because not all of it will come from Unit 4. Some of it is recycled ideas and concepts from earlier units. So that's a clear visual indicator for the teacher as well as the students. And then you have the school link here, which is more of a bigger project-based lesson that allows the students to really independently run with and create and be clever in how they approach their learning here. So this is unique to hand in hand here. So let's talk about that school link activity. So for this one, the topic is animals that make different sounds. So the basic course book is talking about how different animals make different sounds, but we also need to know other things. So where are these animals found? What kind of animals they are, and the vocabulary that goes along with that. So as you can see on the page, we're looking at animals that can be found where? On a farm. So these animals we're going to be talking about farm animals. And so what I would do with this is I would tell my students to make a presentation about a farm. I would give them some suggestions on how to do this. So for example, I would ask them to give a guided audio tour of a farm. So they get pictures of a farm and they talk about the animals that are in this farm. But what they're doing is they are recording it. So they're recording, they can write a script if you want them to, or they can just speak into a phone using the target language that they've learned to describe what they see on this farm. So it requires a lot of creativity. It requires them to work together. And it requires critical thinking on how that they would present that for somebody who is listening. So that's one option that they can do. If you have kids that are a bit more artistic or a bit more tactilely minded, they like to play with things and use their hands, you can have them build a diorama, like a shoebox diorama, and they can cut out pictures and glue them into the box and make a farm in a shoebox, something like that. Instead of just doing a picture or a poster, it's a three-dimensional depiction. Or you can play a game, a simple game where you do animal sounds, and you can either have recordings of animal sounds or you can have the students make animal sounds. It's really up to them. Especially one thing that I like to do, because I'm from the United States, and as a teacher in Korea, my students, their native language is Korean, obviously, but Koreans have different sounds for for animals. So the dog sound in English is different from the dog sound in Korean. So those using that and doing cross-cultural sounds and things like that really also incorporates that global communication, global connection angle that we present in Hand in Hand. So, as we are coming to the end, let's talk about choosing the right book. So I've discussed how each of these books are similar and different, but really the important thing here is knowing which book actually is suitable for your students. And the way we can do this is by considering a few things. So these are some helpful questions. The first is, what do you want from a course book? So do you want an emphasis on speaking? Do you want more writing? Do you want a more well-rounded curriculum? That's things to consider there. But also, what do your learners need? What do your students excel at? What do you know that they are able to grasp without problem, without issue? And what do they struggle with? What is a skill that they maybe have a little bit more trouble with? Do they struggle with listening? Do they have trouble reading? These things can be useful to know, because if you know that they're struggling with it, that means they're going to need additional practice. Third question, how does the course book support my strengths as a teacher? Now, if you as a teacher have full control over the books that you're choosing, this is an easy question to answer. If you know that you have a passion for teaching reading, and you have a plan in place and a system in place that you know is effective for teaching reading, you should be choosing a course book that supports that, not goes against it, because it just becomes too difficult for you as a teacher to plan two systems for your students. It also can be quite confusing for your students. But as well, if you know that you struggle with teaching grammar, or you're not as comfortable doing a listening lesson, knowing that a course book has enough support to kind of pick up where you are weakest is also very, very useful to know. This gets harder. This third question gets a little bit harder if it's school-wide or if it's an administrative decision. You can put in your input on these concepts, but if it's an administrative decision as opposed to a teacher's decision, you want to make sure that the course books also provide a certain degree of training so that all of the teachers are able to be familiar with the course books. And question 4, what can or do you need to contribute to add to the course book? So this depends on the length of your term, the length of your course, how many classes you have. Maybe you have a certain number of days dedicated to just course book work, but you also have maybe project days, or you have experience days, things like that. So where you put an emphasis on CLIL. And so you have Science Day where you teach in English, but how does the course book contribute to that? How do the concepts in the course book help and assist with those other classes, those other expansion activities? That's something that also needs to be considered. And then what materials do you need or want to use during your lessons? I always encourage teachers when they are planning their lessons to plan for an entire unit. So they know exactly which activities that they want to do. They know that they have the materials to accomplish those lessons and fulfill the unit effectively. But when choosing a book as well, if your course book is asking you to do a lot of crafts, arts and crafts, or they're asking you to print out a lot of things, this can be important because if you have a printer budget for your class or for your school year, if you have to print out a lot of extra worksheets to make your class effective, maybe you should examine or find another book that has more of a workbook focused course book as opposed to worksheets. So those sorts of things are important as well. Knowing limitations really is what that is. And then the big one, the probably the most obvious one, is how many lessons do you need for a semester or for a school year? Are you going to be using a book for a semester? Are you going to be using it for a school year? Are you going to use it for a couple of months and then transition to something else? Knowing this will help you identify which book will help be most effective for you as well, because books have different speeds. They have different amounts of content to them. And some books require more time than others. And your students may need more time with one book than another class or something like that. So these are just helpful questions to think about. The other thing that I would like to talk about is book support. So course books have this foundational knowledge and they have their language targets, they have their methodology, but they have different emphases that we discussed as well. But with each course book, we can supplement what they use or what is included in a course book with skill books. So skill books are books that help emphasize a specific language topic or skill. So things like My Reading or Smart Reading are skill books that emphasize reading. They talk about and use the other skills, listening, speaking, and writing as well, but the focus is going to be on reading. So if you're teaching Smart with Smart English and you want to incorporate more reading, but at a level appropriate pace, then you can choose a skill book like My First Reading or My Next Reading or even Smart Reading to support and supplement your course book. So basically all it is skill books provide additional practice. They fill gaps where they exist. And they also reinforce and encourage independent study, because you can use these as not just in the classroom, but you can create homework assignments and things like that as well. Skill books also help you personalize topics, because you can find that certain course books will have these topics in this order, but your skill book, you can pick and choose units that also connect to the course book topics as well. So in terms of support, we have for Little Hands, we have these three books. We have others as well, but these are like the big three that I would recommend. We have Little Phonics, EFL Phonics, and Smart Phonics Readers. And these help add additional phonics support and reading support for Little Hands. These are just examples. For Smart English, Let's Smile and Hand in Hand, we have skill books that are dedicated to listening, reading, writing, grammar. So Listen Up My First Reading, My First Writing, My First Grammar. These are examples. We have others as well, but these are just some easy examples that we use to connect and add additional support for our course books. So we have about 10 minutes left, so I have just our conclusion, and then we'll talk about and answer questions as needed. But in conclusion, the important things to remember: choosing a course book is less about what you want to teach and more about how you want to teach. How do you want to deliver that information? Choosing a course book also means choosing a text that supports the teacher's strengths and enhances their weaknesses. So what I mean by that is that you get support from the course book as a teacher to make sure that your students are getting an effective lesson. This also means that you're getting the training that you need to ensure success in your classroom. Choosing a course book means choosing something attractive and engaging to the students, which means new educational trends may not be suitable for your students. They may not be the best thing to use. 21st century skills are very, very important. But if your students are there and they really need to work on foundational basic things and get them excited about just language in general, maybe you want to go for a more traditional mode of course book. That's perfectly okay. It's not always necessary to be on the cutting edge if being on the cutting edge means leaving your students behind. The goal is for your students to learn, and education is one of those ways. We can build in those 21st century skills or a whole child approach in a number of ways, not just with the course book. So choose the book that really will be best for your students. Don't choose a course book based on something that is trendy. I know that's hard to do because also as teachers and as administrators, we don't always have 100% control over what our students learn. Parents have demands. There is assessment that has to be done. So all of those things have to be factored in. But really, when we get down to it, even if we have all these other restrictions placed upon our classes, the emphasis and the focus is always going to be on our child and our students in the classroom. And that should always be our focus front and center. And we do what we can with that. So I hope these course books and these rundowns were helpful in helping you choose a course book for your next semester. Thank you. So again, if you have questions about any of the activities that I presented or about any of the course books, I'll happily answer questions now, but you can also contact me at a later date. The PowerPoint presentation will be made available to you as well. So you can also look at the activities there. And if you are curious about the course books, or you're looking to purchase course books, you can contact any of our partners if you are from any of these countries. If you do not see your country listed here, you can contact us at inquiry@eltkorea.com, which you'll be emailing us here in Korea. Thank you all very much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season and a wonderful winter break if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, or good summer break if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. So I will see everybody next time. Bye-bye.